Shalom everybody, I'm Bill Cloud and I want to welcome you to International School of the Words course on Hebrew. Actually, this is Hebrew 201. So I'm going to assume that if you're tuning into this that you've already completed Hebrew 101 or you've completed a similar course. So again, welcome. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the board here and we're going to share with you our goals for this particular unit, and that is number one, we want to improve letter recognition and sight reading. In other words, if you've gone through Hebrew 101, hopefully you've internalized the letters and you recognize them, but you might have to strain it a couple to make sure that you're not confusing the letter Chaf, for instance, with the letter Kaf or the letter Bet or Vet. And so as we go through this, we hope to improve letter recognition and hopefully get a little more practice at looking at words and not having to pronounce them or to study them too closely syllable by syllable, but to begin to look at the word and be able to pronounce it. And I hope I made sense there. We also want to develop a larger vocabulary. And when I say larger, that's a relative term. We have a very small vocabulary. If you completed Hebrew 101, well, we're going to, hopefully by the end of Hebrew 201, you're going to know a lot more Hebrew words. Again, relative to what you know right now. We're going to, in Hebrew 201, introduce the idea of gender, and that is male and masculine, which is in most languages throughout the world, Hebrew included. English is not one of those languages that male and female gender as it relates to words comes to mind, but it's very important in Hebrew. We're also going to introduce to you the singular terms, or we're going to introduce to you singular terms and plural terms. And we'll develop this as we go through the next 10 sessions. We're also going to spend a lot of time each session learning modern Hebrew script. And I want to stress modern Hebrew script, as opposed to ancient Hebrew pictographs, things that we will look into in future courses. But Hebrew modern script, it would probably be best understood to be kind of the Hebrew equivalent of our cursive writing. Although it won't look attached like all of our cursive letters tend to be, nonetheless, it'll look distinctly different than the block letters. So we're going to begin to learn that. Now, let me go ahead and interject this thought in the form of a question. Why do we want to learn modern script? And my answer to that is, if you go to Israel, or if you continue to learn Hebrew, you're eventually going to run into this. And so I think it would be easier to try to introduce it here rather than later. If you go to Israel and you're looking around, yeah, you'll see the block letters, but you're also going to see a lot of the Hebrew modern script. So we're going to introduce that. We're going to develop that as we go along. And as I said earlier, we're making the assumption that you've already completed Hebrew 101 or you've completed a similar program that teaches you the Hebrew letters, the nukud, the vowel points, and all these kinds of things. So here are our very basic and simple objectives, and it is our hope that by the time you complete this course that you're going to have a very, very firm foundation on which to build your understanding of Hebrew and taking it further. Now, we're going to begin this session with going back and reading some. We're not going to go back over each individual letter. We're making the assumption that you've already mastered that. We're not going to recount everything there is to know about every vowel point. Again, we're assuming that you've already mastered that or that you are in the process of mastering that. So we're just going to read this passage from the book of Genesis, and we're going to take it kind of slow to begin with. So again, you should know by now that we're reading Hebrew from right to left. So we're going to begin here with this word, vayechulu. Vayechulu. Remember the chaf here is going to get the guttural sound. Vayechulu. Vayechulu. The next word, hashamayim. Hashamayim. The next word, v'ha'aretz, v'ha'aretz, v'ha'aretz. And so this first line, vaychulu, vaychulu, hashamayim, hashamayim, v'ha'aretz, v'ha'aretz. Vaychulu, hashamayim, v'ha'aretz. The next line, v'chol, v'chol, v'chol. Tsevam, tsevam, I'll do it a little slower. Tsevam, tsevam. And you see here, these two little points here. Don't ask me what to call them because I don't remember, but this would be, it's a punctuation mark. And so we have a break in the sentence. And so actually, if we were going to read this first sentence, it would be, starting here with our top line, Vaychulu hashamayim v'ha'aretz v'chol tzevaam. So that's the first sentence. What does that mean, Bill? Well, hang on, we're going to tell you in just a little bit, but let's continue practicing our reading. Next word, vayechol, vayechol, vayechol. Next line, Elohim, Elohim, bayom, bayom. Hashvi'i, Hashvi'i, Hashvi'i. So Elohim, Bayom, Hashvi'i. The next line, Melachto, 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 Asher, Asher, Asa, Asa. So this last line, Melachto, Asher, Asa. And so if I come back up here, remember we read this first sentence, if I were to read all of this together, it would go something like this. Vayechol Elohim Bayom Hashvi'i Melachto Asher Asa. Vayechol Elohim Bayom Hashvi'i Melachto Asher Asa. Now I read it kind of quickly, but eventually you'll be, hopefully if you stay with us, you'll be reading it kind of quickly like that as well.
We will resume this teaching after a short message from International School of the Word.
This teaching is one lesson taken from a full course on ISOW.org. If you are enjoying this video, we invite you to check out the full course in the links below. For the best value, try our All Access Pass. At just $99 per month, you can access thousands of hours worth of high-quality, world-class teaching. To check local pricing in your country, visit ISOW.org. For more great teachings like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel and follow us on our social media platforms.
Now, back to this teaching from International School of the Word.
We're not going to worry so much about what it means right now, anyway. We want to practice on pronouncing the letters properly, pronouncing the vowel points properly, getting those guttural sounds in there, as in the word melachto, melachto, as opposed to malakto. So, totally different word, melachto. So we want to, again, practice on recognizing those letters as quickly as we can, understanding it takes time, it takes practice. And by the way, you need to practice. And then we want to recognize those vowel points as quickly as we can. Once again, it's going to take some time, but just like if you started out reading or learning English as your first language, You had to work through the process of learning the letters, learning the vowels, and those kinds of things. But after a while, you were able to recognize words at a glance. So that's the goal. That's what we're shooting for. Understanding that it's not going to happen overnight. Now we want to go back to our board here. We're going to read the rest of this passage that we've taken from the book of Genesis. And so our first word here is vayishbot. 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 Bayom. 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 Hashvi'i. We've had that word in the previous panel. Hashvi'i. Hashvi'i. So this first line once again. Vayishbot. Vayishbot. Bayom. Bayom. Hashvi'i. Hashvi'i. The next line, mikal. Now notice the kaf here has got the dogish in the middle, so it's not going to get the guttural sound, the ch. It's going to get that K sound. Mikal. Mikal. Melachto. Now here, the chaf does get the guttural sound because the dogish is not there. So we got the K sound here, k, as in mikal. Here we have the chaf sound as in melachto. Melachto. And so here's what I'm trying to emphasize, to be able to quickly identify these letters, and particularly the ones that have look-alikes, to quickly identify them and know what sound they're going to get. Understanding, once again, it's going to take some practice. Melachto. Next word. Asher. Asher. Now I notice a typo here, an omission, more or less, on my part, and we forgot to put the dogish above the sheen here so that you would know that that is a sheen and that gets the sh sound. So I apologize for that, but so you'll know this is understood to be the sheen that gets the sh sound. So it's asher. Asher. Sometimes things happen, even though we have our plans and we go back and look at it, it still happens. So, going back, let's redo this second line, or reread this second line. Mikal, Mikal, Melachto, Melachto, Asher, Asher, Mikal Melachto Asher. And then let's come down here. Asa. 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 And notice once again we have that punctuation mark here. And so that tells me that we've come to the end of a phrase or sentence. So if we were to read all of this together, it would go something like this. Vayishbot bayom hashvi'i. Mikal melachto asher asa. Next word. Vayvarech. 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 The chaf is on the end. The guttural sound. Vayvarech. Vayvarech. Elohim. 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 So, these two words here, once again, Vayvarech Elohim. And we're coming down to the next line. Now, before we pronounce these words, again, here is a punctuation mark. And if you look at Hebrew text, you will see this punctuation mark frequently. Many times it is to be used joining the word et, and we'll, in the future, we'll talk about the letter et, which in this particular case is a word that is not translated. it actually serves as a sign of the direct object. And let me give you a for instance. Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 in Hebrew says, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Twice the word et, aleph tav, is used in that phrase. When it's translated into English, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, there is no word that is, there isn't any translatable word there for aleph tav or et, because in Genesis 1 verse 1, it serves a grammatical purpose, and it is to point or to be a sign of the direct object, which in its first instance would be hashamayim, the word for heavens, and then when it's used again, it's a sign of the direct object haaretz, or the earth.
Thank you so much for supporting our ministry. If this has blessed you, please say a prayer for us, and if you would like to give, we have 3 ways that you can do that. You can give online at isow.org/donate, or text the word GIVE and the amount to 423-225-9022. That's 423-225-9022. You can also give through the mail at ISOW, 340 Paul Huff Parkway, Northwest, Cleveland, Tennessee, 37312. Thank you. God bless you, and may the Lord multiply your seed. Now back to this teaching from the International School of the Word.
So now going back to our screen here, we have the word aleph tav, and it's pronounced et, and this little punctuation mark here is intended to join it, so to speak, to the word yom, because that's what it's pointing to. It's this yom hashvi'i is the direct object. So that's not something that's important that you remember right now. I just wanted to explain why we have this little hyphen-looking punctuation mark here. But now, as far as the pronunciation, it's et yom. Et yom. In fact, almost pronouncing it as one word. Et yom. Et yom. Hashvi'i. Hashvi'i. Now that's the 3rd time that we've seen this word in our passage. So this last line is et yom hashvi'i. Et yom hashvi'i. So let's go back and read the whole thing once again. Vayishbot. Vayishbot. Bayom. Bayom. Hashvi'i. Hashvi'i. Mikal. Mikal. Melachto. Melachto. Asher. Asher. Asa. Asa. Vayvarech. Vayavarech. Elohim. Elohim. Et yom. Et yom hashvi'i. Hashvi'i. And let's go to our last slide here. First word, Vaychadesh. 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 Oto. 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 Ki. Again, has the dogish, so it gets the K sound. Ki. Vo. Vo. So this first line, Vaykadesh, Vaykadesh, Oto, Oto, Ki, Ki, Vo. Vo. The next line, Shavat. 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 Mikal. 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 Melachto. Melachto. We've had that word several times. Melachto. So this line, Shabbat Mikal Melachto. This line, Asher. Asher. Bara. Bara. Elohim. Elohim. So this line is Asher, Bara, Elohim, and then our last word, La Asot. La Asot. La Asot. So if we were to read this whole panel, Vaykadesh Oto Kivo Shavat Mikal Melachto Asher Bara Elohim La'asot. Now you're asking perhaps what this is down here. This is the Hebrew word Breshit, or we would say Genesis. And so what we have here is Breshit, chapter 2, verse 1 through 3, or Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 through 3. That's what we read. And so if you don't recall exactly what that says, let me read to you what we just read in Hebrew. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their vast array. And by the seventh day, God had finished the work He had done, or He had been doing. So on the seventh day, He rested from all of His work. And God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it He rested from all the work of creating that He had done. And so we kept pointing out that that word hashvi'i, that's referring to this seventh day. And God is completing His work, all of the things that He had created. So anyway, we just wanted to review and practice on reading those letters, quickly identifying the letters and the sounds. And mind you, I still have to. I have to look at things a couple of times and make sure that this is the right letter, this is the right sound. And sometimes, you know, just like if I'm talking to a crowd of people in English, sometimes my tongue can get ahead of my brain and pronounce things wrong. Well, you're going to find that that is common as you're learning the Hebrew language here. Now, as I said at the beginning, we're going to get into some other things and introduce some other things to you. Namely, we're going to begin to introduce to you modern Hebrew script. And so that's what we're going to do now. So I want us to go to the board. We're going to get started in this process. And before we go too far, let's take a look at our block letters that we should already be familiar with. Of course, this is the letter Aleph. It's the first of the Hebrew letters. And of course, it is silent. It will take the sound of any vowel point or nikud that's attached to it. Or if it doesn't have any vowel sound attached to it, it will just be there and it will remain silent. All right, so that's the Aleph. So with each of these letters, the mem, of course the mem gets the M sound, the tav, as in Torah, with the dagesh, without the dagesh, the nun, which is the N sound, the hey, the sound of breath, the H sound, if you will, and then the yud, which gets the Y sound. All of these letters have equivalents in Hebrew script, and so that's what we're going to take a look at now. So here's the Aleph that you're accustomed to, the block letter, but here is the Aleph in script. It looks similar, but it looks quite different. The letter Mem that you're accustomed to, that's the block letter, but here is the letter written in script. It looks quite different. In fact, it looks almost like an N. Well, here's the Nun, which in Hebrew gets the N sound, but here's the script letter. It looks similar, but it's a little different, and so on. Here's the Tav. Here is the Tav written in script. Here's the Hey. This is the Hey in script. And of course the Yud. And this is how the Yud is written in script. It's just a little dot, or as Yeshua said, a jot. So let's begin now and look at these letters in script, recognizing them, and let's learn how to write them. And so we're going to start with the letter Aleph. So this is the letter Aleph. And if you're going to write the letter Aleph, your first thing, you're going to come here, and we're just going to make a backward C. Now we're not going to bring this bottom line all the way out across the bottom margin to meet the top line. No, we're going to just do it this way. All right? I mean, it's not the end of the world if you do, but anyway, you're going to make that. And then it's just going to be not exactly a straight line down, a slight pitch to the left as you head toward the bottom margin. But that's how you're going to write the Hebrew letter Aleph in its script form. Pretty simple, something you need to practice. This is the letter Mem. And again, what sound does the Mem get? It's the sound, as in Mayim, or as in, in our language, Mom. It gets that M sound, Mem. But this is how you write the Mem in script, or this is what it looks like in its script form. So to write it, again, we're going to start at the top margin. We're going to make a little curved line this way, and then we're going to come up diagonally to the top margin, and then we're going to make a little curved line out that way. It's going to look a lot like our letter N, but don't make it a letter N. Make sure you have the little curve here. Make sure you have the little curve there. So, Aleph, Mem. The silent letter, the sound. So you need to kind of look at these, memorize them, learn to recognize them. And I know some might be thinking, well, we just got through the block letters. Why do we want to learn these letters too? Because you're already in the mindset of learning new things. So we're going to kind of introduce this to you so you don't get so accustomed to the block letters that by the time we were to introduce this later, it creates a problem. So Aleph, Mem. Hope that made sense. All right. The next letter is the letter Tav, and this is the way it's going to look in script. It looks similar to the letter Tav in its block form, but there are distinctions. So to write it, we're going to start up here. We're going to curve it around. It almost looks like the letter Resh at this point. But we're going to come over here. Remember our little extensions here. Make sure those little extensions are there. Above this line, you've got that little part coming up toward the top margin. So we're going to have that little extension. We're going to come down, and then we're going to swing it out along that bottom margin. So that's the letter Tav, again, in its script form. This is Nun, as it appears in script. Nun. And this, quite frankly, is just going to look a lot like our letter J, or a fish hook, which is kind of interesting because Nun is the Hebrew word that is associated with fish. Joshua was the son of Nun, not the son of Nun, the son of Nun. And so interestingly, this looks kind of like similar anyway to a fish hook. So this is the letter Nun. It gets the N sound. And this is what it looks like in script. And then finally, the letter He, the letter that is similar to our H in that it gets the sound, the sound of breath. He, this is how it looks in script, and this is how we're going to write it. We're going to start at this top margin here, and we're going to make something similar to how when we started writing the letter Tav. Similar, not exact, but similar. And we're going to swing it around here, and then of course we've got to put the foot on it for it to be the letter He. And so we're going to make the little foot there. So that's the He in its script form. And then the last one for this session is the letter Yud. And this is what it looks like again in script. It's just a little dot almost, or a little jot. It's just the beginning of a line. So you just make that short little mark there, just a short little mark that's hanging out there between the margins, and that is the letter Yud. And so once again, we're doing this because if you are going to continue with your Hebrew studies, the language that is, you are going to encounter the Hebrew script. And so I think it's a good idea to go ahead and incorporate that into all this information that you're digesting right now. So that's why we're doing Hebrew script. Now, I'm going to go back to the board and we're going to practice reading, not just in the block letters, but in the script. In fact, we'll read through the block letters kind of briskly. Ima, at, mi, ani, ma, ata. But now we want to come down here and do it with the script. And what we've done is we've duplicated this down here in script. But I don't want you to read it from here while you're trying to learn to read it in script. So this is ima, ima, at, mi, ani, ma, ata. And so once again, ima, at, mi, ani, ma, ata. And that's where we're going to pause for this session. And we come back in our next session, we're going to pick it up here and we're going to practice reading not only the block letters, but we're going to practice reading the letters in script as well. So we'll see you in session 2.